Ambassador, when you look at everything that's happened over the last 72 hours, what does this mean for Brexit?
Well, first of all, it's unprecedented for a sitting president of the United States during a state visit to attack an ally and do it so publicly and endorse one of her rivals for that position. It's unprecedented and it's outrageous. The second point that's important is that the comments were just, not on the mark. A lot of U.S. businesses, as you know and as your viewers would know, have invested in the U.K. as a gateway to Europe, just like the Japanese have. So, in fact, many of those businesses want U.K. regulations to remain aligned with those of the EU. The second point that's important is that a lot of the regulations that the U.S. complains about and that the President and Wilbur Ross wanted the U.K. to ditch are those agricultural regulations that impede U.S. exporters from selling GMO products and hormone-treated beef and so on. Those things aren't going to change.
But, Ambassador, I guess what I was trying to get in my question is, the President of the United States shows up saying maybe it's Boris Johnson that should be Prime Minister. Does the U.K. rally for the Prime Minister? Does it actually make her stronger?
I think they probably will. We've seen a lot of reactions so far, mostly from the Labour Party, but I think we'll see a lot of reactions as well from the Tories, saying it's just not appropriate for a president to be interfering in UK politics in this way.
Ambassador, probably we all want to go to Venice and hide in the Peggy Guggenheim collection today, where you've provided leadership. That would be a good place to get out of this storm. You are one of the singular American voices. Your cross-section of law and diplomacy as well, in this cacophony that we see here. How does Washington extract itself to as President Obama would say, and I would suggest President Trump as well, to a better place out of the endless and ceaseless noise that we have? What do Republicans on the Hill have to do? What do Democrats have to do? What do these institutions have to do?
Well, that's a great question, and there is no clear answer to it. But this is my answer to your question.
Please.
I think U.S. business does have to speak up. Now, this is not a partisan issue. This is important. It is not a partisan issue to ask the question, how is any of this advancing U.S. interests, particularly U.S. business interests? When we withdraw from international trade, when the EU sets its standards globally, including in agriculture, on data protection,
right,
otherwise, and we're not doing it, how does it advance U.S. interests?
2 days after Brexit, Francine and I were still trying to get through the debris of that evening and into the next morning. I remember UBS purchased a property or went from lease to ownership or whatever on the River Thames. We're going to hear from James Dimon today in his J.P. Morgan earnings. What does someone like Jamie Dimon have to say to suggest to President Trump this behavior, this tabloid, is not in the best interests of all? What does Jamie have to do?
Well, the basic point is, remember who your allies are and who your enemies are. Let's stop confusing the two. We need to work with our allies, including the European Union, who are natural partners in advancing our interests, particularly on trade and on the business interests who your viewers are particularly interested in. That means, for example, identifying the issues where the president is correctly identified as being problematic. IP theft, market access to various countries, not only China. We should be working with the EU, as we have been in the past, on those issues rather than being at war with the EU on cars and on aluminum and on steel. That's the basic point.
Right, but Ambassador, this helps with his popularity, right? We're close to the midterm elections, so actually America going at it alone, a strongman president that can get a deal with China, sounds better than going through allies in Europe and trying to figure out what we do with IP.
Yes, but that's short-term thinking. I think businesses should be in the business of midterm and long-term thinking as well. And we will soon see the consequences of potentially $1 trillion trade war on U.S. exporters. A lot of people are assuming that this is just negotiating tactics, right? The president knows what he's doing. He's a good negotiator, successful businessman. It'll all sort itself out. Be careful about that kind of, thinking, because I don't see a strategy behind this. Businesses need to warn this president.
Isabel, what's pressed in the markets? Do markets need to warn President Trump?
I think they do, and I think they are. And in fact, I'm sure again we're going to hear in the earnings call some stronger language from the corporate world that came out clearly from the Fed minutes that were published last week. The businesses are beginning to speak, and as I was saying earlier, the markets are pricing in much higher risk premium in every asset class under the sun than they did last year. Why is that? It's in large part because of all this uncertainty that the the U.S. Policies have been creating.
In your government studies at Harvard and then on to Oxford and the Columbia Law, all the track of Anthony Gardner, what I find so important here is, in event after event, the unpredictable happens. Are we set up right now for the unpredictabilities that we heard financially in 1998 or what we saw in 1989 out of the Soviet Union? Are we at that instability within Europe right now?
Well, we're sending a lot of negative signals, and signals, communication, and words matter. Even if all of this is sorted out, we are sending dangerous signals about how the president is at least ambivalent about our alliances, NATO and the EU. That's dangerous. Look at historical evidence.
Are the Baltic states at risk here? I mean, we're talking about Georgia and the rest of it tangential in Ukraine. Are the Baltic states at risk?
I think they feel that they're a risk, and it empowers those who believe that those frontline states actually may not be defended at a time of need. Let's look at historical experience. In 1914, when both sides mobilize, there comes a point when it's very hard to withdraw. I'm talking about the trade war here. We are at an inflection point.